welcome everybody to another episode of Full Spectrum Universe. And man, do we have a great show for you today. It is a complete delight to have my guest on today, by a gentleman by the name of Philip Kinsella. And he is a two-time acclaimed author. He also hosts a podcast. Just to let everybody know, I have an announcement to make as well. If you haven't read the posts, Full Spectrum Universe has been picked up by another network. It is called RU Media Network. But thank you to David Wolliver and Eric McGill for seeing something in this show that's bringing information to those. We're going to be on Saturday nights from 8 to 10 p.m., and that is Eastern Standard Time. Also want to give a shout out to the Global Enlightenment Network, where we were picked up on another show as well. So we'll be on Mondays from 9 to 11 p.m. Me and my co-host, Melinda, Rescue Media Melinda. You guys have seen her here on the show. And we'll still be doing our regular show, which is 6 to 8 p.m. on Tuesday evenings. So the Monday night show is going to be called something different because there is a co-host involved. So we've made a new show for it. It's going to be called The Seer and the Scholar. Hence, I am the scholar. She is the seer. She has all the stuff. So with that, let's get into the opening and let's get this bad boy started.
This is Special Report.
Black holes are one of the strangest things in existence.
Neil Armstrong may have seen extraterrestrials on the moon.
When he spies a discernible shape.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
You can deny all the things I've seen, all the things I've discovered, but not for much longer. Because too many others know what's happening out there. And no government agency has jurisdiction over the truth.
All right. Philip, how are you today, my friend?
I'm very well, thank you, Rob, and thank you very much for inviting me on your wonderful program. I'm very honored.
Thank you for being here. It's actually an honor for us to have you here. Just to give people a little bit of background of me and Philip's connection, we met on Facebook Messenger. We had a couple of great conversations. We had a lot of positive reinforcement and a lot of talk of things in a positive light. So he is also, like I said, as of right now, as I know he has more coming and probably more that he has written. He has two books, one by the name of Researching for the Divine and Guardians of the Dead, as you saw in the promo poster that I put up for everybody. Philip, it's so great to have you here. Why don't we start by telling people about really how you got started with all of the writing and how you got to this point in your life?
Well, that's a very good question and one that I'm still trying to work out. But it actually happened many years ago when my twin brother and my twin brother Ronald, we're very close as twins, had observed a UFO with our grandmother, our maternal grandmother, in Middlesex in England when we were roughly around about the age of 13. And this had come in the form of a silver orb that literally came through a clear sky and came over one of the trees in the back garden because they lived in a very big house, and then appeared over her head. And when we asked our grandmother, who was psychic, what this was, and she said, well, the fairies had come to take a closer look at us. But we knew at that point that, she was obviously using this to cover a more complex reality. And this led further into observing what we call UFOs, sporadically and at close range, and with other witnesses that were there. And one of these happened recently on the 9th of April of 2016 at 11:15 here in England at night. And they were captured by my niece. It's a long story, but that will be appearing in the new book, You, the Public Deceived. But this whole reality seemed to shatter because we live in a system that programs us into the belief that we are flesh and blood entities with a sell-by date. We're not to ask any questions. And of course, when I was a kid, I was very curious about, psychic phenomena and UFOs. And the UFO department has been something that's been longer in my life than the psychic exploration. But there is a connection, I believe. And this is what led me then down the rabbit hole. And connected me with some brilliant minds in the world. But the overall shock of this was an experience that I had back in 1989, or the winter of 1989, which has been documented in my other books, where I had what people term embarrassingly an alien abduction. It was the only one alien abduction that I recall. But nevertheless, the experience was a very horrific one. And analyzing and trying to understand quite what happened there is something that I wanted to discover. And as I was led down this path into trying to work out, what these things are, where they come from, and why it happens to people, I then unfortunately, to some degree, fell into the hands of the media circuit, television, national television. And not all the programs, but some of the programs were very negative. And I realized at that point that it was becoming a circus, that the media that deals with all of these types of subjects will ridicule them and won't look at them in a organized or sensible fashion, and that they're out to tell us that these things don't exist. So my question was either I'm lying or they're lying. And I wanted to find out which one of us was lying. And, throughout all these years of investigations and research, it's evident to me that we have been lied to. And hence the title, if I may be bold to push my next book that's out in the new year, You, the Public, Deceived, The Grand UFO Deception, which is coming out via Philip Mental, the British ufologist's publication press. And I was angry and annoyed at the same token that the public have been misled and easily manipulated and easily controlled. And within the current environment of where we stand at present, without mentioning too much, because we have to be very careful, we can see that fear and that the control and rage and anger is now coming in. And it's sad for me, not just as a what people term a clairvoyant medium, but I would term an interpreter, because you're merely interpreting information coming through on a different vibration level. But it's sad for me to see that all these changes are getting worse, and people are now rebelling, and there's a lot of fighting. And if we just stopped for one moment to realize that, we are much more than just the flesh and blood that we occupy. So in a roundabout way, this is how I got involved. And I think even at a young age, it was harder for me growing up as a kid in the 80s, because that was the birth of computer technology, and I'd seen that. And also it was the press and the media connections were very powerful. So we didn't have connections like this then. So it was kind of like, you either went to the library to do your research, or you had to wait for a book for its publication date to come out, and you had to write to people and wait weeks on end for a reply. But today, thankfully, to some degree, it's much easier that we can connect with like minds in a very quick and easy fashion. So that's how I got involved with the subject matter.
That's exactly right. If I can only imagine during the 80s, the people didn't have these platforms like right now to tell their truths and to speak what they've been through, their experiences. And it must have been bottling up, because it must have felt like that things were against you.
Yes.
So much was against you, and that sucks, of course. But that, and like you also said, you didn't have the information at your fingertips to type it in and then all of a sudden find your like-minded people where you can tell your story, which it's got to be hard. It's got to be hard.
Well, I didn't want to tell my story, Rob. To be honest with you, it all happened, I suppose, in some form of synchronistic manner. And just going back before I go ahead with what I'm just about to say, we have to also be careful with a lot of sensationalism, the lies, disinformation, this type of thing. So we operate, or I operate with the group of other people in kind of like a no-nonsense fashion, but also very understanding fashion. Now, it was hard because back in the 80s, there was no one to link with, no one to talk to, especially in 1989, because during that period, the internet was in its very basic stages. And I could only go to a few UFO groups, and one of which was called BEAMS, which was the British Earth and Aerial Mystery Society, back then. But this is how I was invited to go on TV, television. I didn't want to tell my story, but what I realized then was that some researchers had discovered the full extent of what the abduction was about and had used this against me in a ridiculous fashion. But putting that aside, we understand that the media are controlling, and we understand that most people are aware that, they take it with a pinch of salt with regards to how the media work. But the truth of the matter is that I understand, and I know to be truth, is that there is a psychic component which makes us more than what we are, so we're eternal beings. And there is also another paranormal element which is coming into the fore, and that seemingly operates on a different principle of awareness, if I may state here, like a medium talking to those who have crossed over, and UFOs. And when I got involved with the psychic phenomena, it did make me laugh, Rob, because I thought, well, here's the man who studies UFOs, and now he talks to the dead. And I thought that my reputation would go from where it was right down the pan. But interestingly, through the research, through a lot of the work that we've been doing, we've been understanding that consciousness does survive the state of death. And depending on the belief system of the individual, the brain is merely the conduit for that consciousness or that soul to enter through or link with. Now, I always use the simple analogy of the mobile phone. Imagine that the mobile phone, in a very crude manner, is the human brain, because the mobile phone and the brain, indeed even your TV set, is designed to receive certain signals. So we are basically signals. We are consciousness that's incarnated into this form and experiences this reality, albeit on a temporary basis. And my understanding is that perhaps we take the accumulation of the memories that we've amassed in this life back to the other side, so that perhaps maybe people call it God, but I think it's the God force learns more about itself through us, and as an extension of us, as we do through its force. And thus the creation cycle goes on. But it goes even deeper. Our research is trying to lead us to where the UFO phenomenon comes from. And there was another aspect to this work that interested me, and that was all linked to the abduction back in 1989, which I won't go into here because it's too long-winded. But nevertheless, one part of the abduction felt as though it was physical, which it was, and the other part was non-physical. And I started to discover, with regards to what people call the greys, as they're known within UFO literature, I wanted to find out what they are, where they came from, why they're here, and what they're doing. And through a lot of research and understanding not just the way that consciousness operates through the conduit of the human brain, but also about the paranormal and the other specters that seem to infiltrate our plane of reality very quickly. So, this is the thing that I have to state here as well, Rob. With regards to UFOs, we are told continuously that they don't exist. Now, I will say here for the record that they do. And that's been proven time and time again. You don't need me to prove that to you. I think the world knows this. But it becomes evident when I was linked with NUFORS, or the National UFO Reporting Service, that was created by Nigel Ross. He's a good friend of mine, a lovely chap. And we wanted to build a network that brought in reports into us rather than the other organizations, because those organizations wouldn't release these documents to the public. Now, what I did was that I wrote a letter. I can't say on your wonderful channel who it was to, but it was to someone very high up within the political arena here in England, asking if they would step forward for us to bring about an organization, New Force, to share information and work with truth, work with honesty, and put our heads together to try and work this out. You know, I got silence back, and that told me everything. And you hear this time and time again. So what the system that we serve is doing is trying to distract our attention, not only that we are eternal, immortal beings that are at this moment of time and have been since centuries being controlled, but there are other alternative dimensions of awareness which is able to infiltrate this plane of reality. So, you know, this is my take on the situation. And with regards to the UFO subject, as it were, I know it sounds a little bit, people will say, well, how can someone be involved in UFO research and psychic phenomena? But remember, there must be a connection, because without us being here, without our presence here on Earth, there is much more to our existence. And this may give us a greater understanding of what we may be dealing with alternative dimensions of awareness that's trying to infiltrate this plane of reality, which at the moment is being contained and controlled. Nothing has changed today, has it?
No. But you know what? For people who are naysayers that there is a psychic component to the
Yes.
UFO phenomenon, there's a lot of abduction stories where people only contact the abductor via telepathic communication. So there is some kind of psychic component in that sense as well. You know, just to play devil's advocate for people who don't realize what the connections might be. But, you know, I feel that you're absolutely right. And there's also a lot going on, too. You say like the dimensional stuff. And I believe CERN has a lot to do with that. Like, that's a very long-winded explanation, too. We won't get into it. But one thing I also wanted to ask you was, you know, as per, I know everybody likes to talk about this when it comes to UFO phenomena, but did you see a transition in society with the acceptance of your story when things like Ancient Aliens came out and these stories started to become more, I don't want to say mainstream because they're still shuffled down a little bit, but more prominent through society? What was it like during that time to really get you know, from the 80s and the 90s where it was like hush hush to let's say now where they're actually putting something together in the American government to explore these phenomena, actual agency. So if you could go into that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I felt very annoyed because at the time, the way that the media, you know, dealt with the subject matter, not all of the media, most of the media were understanding, but when you're in a pre-recorded show, they are able to take out the parts they don't want you to talk about, namely the military and so on and so forth, so that it's contained and programmed for the public to just feel that it's just a light story that could be ridiculed or taken seriously. I went through a transition of you know, a little bit of anger, because I thought, well, you know, I've been kicked in the teeth here, and now that the other people are becoming aware of this, which is absolutely fantastic. But for me, on a personal level, it was a transformational experience, although it had happened what I considered to be a very negative experience. Has now taught me that it could have been something quite different. I am in touch with another brilliant researcher here called Pierre Sabac, and he is into ancient languages, angels, fallen angels, that type of thing. And he's found something very interesting with regards to the abduction, because I can still remember it as though it happened yesterday, even though it was in 1989, the winter of 1989. But I'm more interested now in centralizing my energies into breaking down, seeing what it is. Now, we don't have any answers. We only have speculations. And one of the things that was a blessing to me was the fact that, did I have the experience in order for me to understand these alternative dimensions? Well, that could be a yes, because I understood a little bit more about the grays. I'm not saying that I'm in touch with them every day. That's nonsense. I'm not. It was only one experience that I remembered and recalled that I had with them back in 1989. But it's made me realize that perhaps the Greys themselves, the way that they abduct someone, the way that they come across as sexless and unemotional, led me further into an understanding that perhaps, we could be dealing with another soul group that has cloned itself, that has no way of retribution beyond the flesh or the bone or the material existence, and is using human females as the incubators for a new genus, or at least trying to get themselves back into the process of creation. Now, I was accredited with a theory. I was very honored back in 1996, an article that was published many years ago called Spirits in the Material World, and the dynamics of that theoretical work has grown since, because I believe that we're not just dealing with spacemen here. I believe that there is a much deeper level that we have to look into, that is part of the soul, part of our continuation and our heritage, and also about our real existence of where we came from, the creation of man. Because I believe also that, looking back into our history, we've been lied to, and you can find this out within the academic circles of whether it's archaeology or paleontology or anything like this, where you have to follow a certain curriculum within the scientific community, and if you don't follow that, then you don't have a job. So we can see that this deception has been going on for decades, it's centuries. And it feels to me like a lot of people now are waking up, which is beautiful, which is wonderful, because I think the programming from our younger days has got to the stage where people are thinking outside the box now and saying, I'm fed up being told to do a job I don't really want to do. And I'm fed up paying the taxes that seem to increase all the time. I'm fed up having to get up tired and working weekends as well so that I don't have a family connection link. So I think people have stopped and they're starting to rebel. And I think this is a rebellion of consciousness which is occurring here, because because no matter which way you look at this, whether or not you have the grand United States of America or England, or wherever it is, all these systems are controlling the individuals. And I know that we have to have some form of control. That is absolutely prerogative. That's a prerogative. But thinking, we're not allowed to be able to think. We're not allowed to be able to create new hypotheses or understandings about what we are, where we come from, what's out there, what makes things work. And anyone that goes outside that box is immediately condemned. I will tell you, Rob, many years ago when I did a few lectures in my very early days, I was very nervous and laughed at by some people. And and I look back at those days and think how I've grown. And I think we all grow through life and other experiences. But I think we're getting to a point within our evolution, or may I dare use the word spiritual evolution, where people are fed up. It's like they're throwing down their tools. They're saying, I've had enough. Because if we had a world where there was no money and that you could travel to America from England, to go and meet people or discover things, or if you were able to do a job that you really wanted to do, just think how advanced and wonderful this world would be. But we are seeing corruption, darkness, and control. But I always say to people, at the end of the day, love and the spirit of man and woman outshines that darkness. So I know it sounds quite complicated trying to narrow this all into one subject, but my understanding is we have been lied to, and I wanted to find out why we're being lied to. Are all the good souls out there on this planet, the wonderful people? We have our good times, we have our bad times, we have our difficulties. If I could reach out to them and say to them that you are something more than flesh and blood, that you are an incredible being of light, you have so much potential, belief shapes that reality. And this is what we have to share this information. What we have to do is share this information with other people to say, look, at the end of the day, don't feel bad. Don't feel frightened. understand that you are your own God in the making. You are God incarnate. And dare I say that, because people always think that God is a vengeful, wrathful being. Not my type of God, to be honest with you.
No, God is love and light always.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
what you're saying is so, it resonates in me and it's very profound. I feel that everybody has the God light through them, the source. Some people call it the
Yes,
creator. So
yes,
with that being said, to tap into that is divine. And it
yes,
gives you the ability and the energy to push forward. And I agree with you. When this whole thing hit where we were all locked in for a long time, I had an overnight job. I was picking up boxes for a living, and I decided that I wasn't going to do that anymore. That's not what I'm meant to do. I'm meant to exploit the gifts that source or that God light has given me, which is my mouth, the gift of gab, and I'm going to use it to project messages that I fully stand behind or I believe in, and maybe some that I don't, just to open up the conversation and the conjecture of what thought is and the process of a good conversation. And it's a lot of things that we're lacking in community now is the ability to have a good conversation of two opposing sides and bringing them together to actually hash out their differences, but be able, even if you don't agree with them, to be able to respect the other side,
yeah.
and respect where they're coming from. So, I
Mm.
mean, I think I think that you're right on. And, I have a lot of questions. I know you said during this conversation that you were looking into what the grays are,
Yes.
or what do you feel now? Everybody can say whether you're wrong or right. We know that. But what do you feel that they are here and what is their mission?
Well, there are many theories, and I will state for the record very clearly that I am not here to overstep on someone's belief system. That is very dangerous grounds indeed. We are allowed to look outside the box, and I've had people saying, oh, you're wrong, Well, that may be well and true, but we don't know what we're still dealing with. Now, what's interesting with regards to the Greys is that when they abduct someone, they come through the walls or the building of where the person is. And they seem to have to be in close proximity to the person that they are so-called abducting. Instead of, being able to beam them up, as it were, with modern technology like on Star Trek. The other interesting thing about the Greys is that they seem to have no understanding of love, no empathy, no understanding of color, of taste, of time, all these attributes that make us what we are. Now, my understanding is that we, you, me, and everyone else on this planet, hopefully, come through the correct channel of the birthing cycle. So we come through the womb. And as we incarnate from what we call the other side, child grows up and learns. And then when we die, the soul returns back to the other side with its inherent memories, not just from its life that it's lived, but also the past memories, maybe from past lives, which is another department entirely. But I do believe that is possible. Now, if we clone you, say, for instance, and let me say that I cloned you 100 times in a laboratory, your clones would only have the memory or understanding of one single life imprint. So that when you die as the original copy, you will return to source, as it were, or to the Godhead. The hypothesis that I tried to work on was that your cloned souls maybe are not strong enough to be able to be propelled back to where you came from. And so they perhaps, from their level of mental or spiritual stagnation, have grouped themselves into one hive mind consciousness and operating as a one mind, one hive entity. And that what are they interested in? They're interested in reproduction. And, we hear a lot about this. I met Dr. David Jacobs in Arizona some years ago, and he hypothesizes, he could be correct, that they're here with us already. But my understanding is that that the Greys themselves are interested in hybridization. Now, why is that from a species that cannot reproduce? This is where I started to question why they were interested in creating a new genus. And we don't see any Greys walking around here because most of the times in our world, I mean, I could be wrong. I'm sure that most of them are here. Remember, we've got different factions of humans with different agendas. The same could apply to the Greys. There may be different factions of them. But what are they interested in? They're interested in reproduction. They're interested in hybridization with a new genus, a species that they bring the mother on board, back on board, who carried the hybrid, to bond, to show the hybrid love and understanding. So taking our hypothesis further, could it be that perhaps from their level of reality, that they have impregnated our matrix, our reality, and they're infusing this connection of alien stroke human hybridization in order to try to propel them individually back to their source. It could even be that the Greys are perhaps projecting themselves into our reality through a form of remote viewing. That is to say that they are in another dimension and that they're projecting themselves into our field of awareness. Remember also that the Greys do not wish the individual to remember or recall any of the events. Now, that's suspicious. If they were here to help us, they would allow us to remember, but they use some type of screen memory. Now, I also believe that what the Greys are actually doing, it's another theory, is that when they abduct someone, they're actually taking the real part of you away from your physical body, so your soul, and they bring it into their field of vibration so that you're matched by density. For instance, when we die, we understand that we will be able to physically interact with our loved ones. And you hear this all the time through near-death experiences, where the experience is so real and the communication is so amazing. And then they come back and they want to go back there. But the difference between the abduction is that it is very different or negative. And the near-death experience, in more cases than not, is positive. So I started looking into the parallels of what the Greys could or may represent. And I believe that there's a much bigger picture here, because when the soul of the person is taken away from the physical body and brought into their vibrational frequency, where they are able to connect with it, healers are able to affect a physical body, even though they're not touching or in any way around the body, the physical body. They're actually attaching to the energy of the body. So the other thing is that implants can be implanted as well, because we're seeing two sides of a coin that are real. One side is real, the other side is real, but they may be matching their connection between the two and have found a way to penetrate our realm. And I think also that the reason that the public cannot be told, and I'm not just talking about the Greys, as I said before, there are perhaps different factions of them with different agendas. And, you know, I'm not saying that's all of the Greys in total, but they're certainly suspicious. It's certainly, suspicious that they try to blank the experience from the mind of the person who's having the abduction, and that there is memory loss, time loss, because that person has been taken out of their normal time frame and into an area where there is no time. So this may account also for the lack of memory, because the mind in this reality doesn't seem to understand. And sometimes people have to use a regressionist to try to pull those memories forward. But the Greys do their damnedest to mix up the memories so that, you know, anyone that finds out from this side will think that the person's, you know, come out from a pub after having about 100 pints. So, you know, this is the area that we're looking at. There's a spiritual component that seems to be attached to this, and a cloning component. And my argument was, from the very beginning, why are the Greys interested in reproduction when they themselves cannot reproduce? And it's a massive program. And this is something I think that the media tried to ridicule because they didn't want the public to understand more about what was going on. So if it was discovered that, yes, the system tells everyone UFOs are real, but by the way, we can't control them, and the occupants, we understand they can abduct you in the middle of the night, and they can do these experiments on you, and we don't know how to explain that to you. And we have to understand also there's a lot of frightened people out there, God love them, who I understand that find that very, very hard to swallow. So that is my theory. I believe that the Greys are perhaps walking among us as well as humans. I believe that there are different factions of them, but it was just the abduction phenomena that kind of like interested me. But that's how I saw that. Yeah.
I totally agree with you. I believe that they are among us, and I think that you're definitely on to the right track with that too. And that leads me to my next question is we also talked about how, you know, officials or high up people who are in charge of, let's say, society don't want this information getting out. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's because they will not be able to explain the enormity of it. I think also that this phenomena has been going on for a very long time, and not since its first inception, with the Roswell, New Mexico crash landing in 1947. I will state here for the record that there's something very fishy about that, because when the military released the story and said, first of all, that they had a crash disk in their possession, and then they changed it to a mogul weather balloon. Well, if it was that secret, you would have assumed that the scientists within the Army military corps would have been analyzing it and seeing where it came down. They wouldn't just leave it if it was that top secret. So this was where the birth of conspiracy came in, and that's another long story that goes on and rages forever. But the facts are simple and they're clear cut. If it was top secret, why wasn't it being, recorded and observed even during the point of its crash? And it was that top secret that they had remnants of the material apparently splashed across the front page of the papers during that time. So I think the conspiracy of silence is due to the fact that, one, I believe, do have elements of its hardware. And yes, even people say, well, if you believe the Greys are on a different level of reality, how can you say that they're material? Well, of course, because they'll lower their density, their field of vibration, and enter our realm as such. They go in and out very quickly, like you turning the channel on the TV or radio to a different station. Instantly, it changes. So I believe that the system that we serve will not address this, because they could be sued, because all these researchers and people who have claimed this and told time and time again they don't exist will find themselves in very deep waters indeed, and they will realize the big problem where people will really understand that they've been lied to. But I do believe that this is orchestrated on a military level. I don't believe it's a governmental level. I believe that the governments, well, they come and go, don't they? They're like puppets for the establishment. But
Absolutely.
I believe that it's linked with the military core and not so much as the governmental sections.
Well, I agree with that too. And once they lied about it the first time, they must have. Now they have to keep the lie going. Otherwise, they've looked like liars the whole time, and it'll cause chaos. Totally agree with that. Let's move over to the clairvoyant side of your life. I know you said you're clairvoyant and a medium, and you've spoken to entities that had passed. Tell us a little bit about that and how that's affected your life.
Well, I had no wish to be a medium. I mean, it was all very bizarre. I was dealing with the UFO subject, and then my maternal grandmother passed. My twin and I were very close to her, and she was psychic, and she came to me the night she died. She was in Somerset Hospital, and I was here in Bedford, a long way away, and she came to me when she died. So I went to go and see a medium who worked for the FBI in America, and she wiped the floor with me because I'd gone there not believing. And I had to stop in those days, had to stop and find out where her place was. And I asked two old dears and they said, oh, and then when I got to the medium's place, which was some way away, she looked at me and she said, your grandmother's telling me you stopped and asked two people how to get here. I was nearly floored. So I was fascinated by the way she worked. But she also told me that you're a psychic. She said to me, I was like, oh, no, I'm not going down that road. But what happened was that, no, seriously, it's got more problems than anything. But what was interesting was that in 2 years' time, a friend of mine and two other people had died. And a friend of mine who had cancer, he was only 20. I said to him, look, can you do me a favor? Would you be able to show yourself to me after you pass to the other side? And I thought he was going to punch me. He didn't. And he said, well, how do you expect me to do that? And I said, well, I don't know. You'll find a way. And he said, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll beam down like they do on Star Trek. So his funeral came and went, and I walked into a secondhand bookshop, because you can always find the really good old UFO books in there. And this book fell off the shelf called Reunions by Dr. Raymond Moody. And I read it, and it told you how you could communicate with those who had crossed over to the other side. And one of those was a mirror experiment. Well, when I did the mirror experiment, nothing happened. until I came back from work again in the winter. And I'm sitting in the kitchen with looking through the conservatory glass doors, and who do you think walks in front through them? Is my friend who died. And I couldn't believe it. I was absolutely so shocked and floored. I thought, my God, am I going mad? So anyway, I went back to the medium, and I believe that all of us are activated at certain points within our life. I believe that we're all important, that we're all special, that no one's better than anyone else. But there are certain activation points within your spiritual journey, as it were, if I use that word lightly. But I found also that I was fascinated and wanted to find the truth of discarnate communication. I wanted to find out how it worked. And this led me then on to the investigations of psychic exploration, of then taking to platform and then doing it and winning award. I won an award in Portsmouth in 2008, Clairvoyant Award, in front of a panel of very harsh judges, one of which was with the Spiritual National Union. I have no affiliation with them, and magazines. So, and the British medium Tony Stockwell was there. I also met the late, do you know, mine goes blank, doesn't it? I know, no, it just goes blank. It's like, I can see him. There was another medium who's very famous, and he helped me a little bit. So I've had a real push in that direction, and it's something I'm still doing, but I try to deal with it in a black and white fashion. I don't feed, I just ask for yes or no, and I deal with the evidence that come through. And I don't deal with the names of the person, because as I've always said, a name is just a tag to identify the body in this life. You know, names and national insurance numbers,
Right,
I think
right.
are discarded when we pass over. So it's, you know, it's really Colin Fry. That's it. Sorry, God love him. Please forgive me, Colin Fry, who was a good, brilliant medium over here in England. So I was blessed, but I just found myself like weird, because, you know, here I am dealing with UFOs and I'm dealing with psychic phenomena, and the medium that I'd seen had said to me, it's a bit like The Matrix, isn't it? The film The Matrix. The medium said to me, she said to me, you will be bridging the gap between the psychic and UFO phenomena. And I didn't understand what she meant. And I guess I'm still trying to do that to this day. So, you know, that is in a nutshell, that's how I got involved. But, you know, I claim nothing. The claims are only through the evidence that you bring through. And how you deal empathically with the information that comes through. I like Doris Stokes, the late Doris Stokes. I couldn't raise the skin of a rice pudding. That's what she used to say. We are just receivers and transmitters for information that is operating on a higher frequency of awareness, but understanding it is kind of like, sometimes it can be a bit tricky.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just for anybody out there in the audience that's watching, if you have any questions for Philip, please put them in the comments. I'll do my best to get them on, and then he can answer your questions for you. Now that we've talked about all of the aspects of paranormal, supernatural phenomenon, UFOs, let's talk about your podcast a little bit. I know you guys have a show or a podcast. I want you to tell the audience on what got you into that a little bit, or what made you decide that you and your brother, I believe it's you and your brother on the podcast, correct?
Yes,
So
my twin brother. We're you know, we're identical. So people get confused with us sometimes, and it can be a problem because he's also an author and an artist. And when I put one of his books up, it's like they think it's mine. I'm like, no, I don't want to steal his thunder here. So we've gone on a show many years ago. It was with the Paranormal UK Radio Network here in England. And there is two wonderful people. Well, I'm linked with many of them because we're all wonderful. Mark Johnson and Irene Ellen Block. And we'd finished the interview, and then she phoned me up, me and my brother up, and she said, listen, would you like to do your own radio show? And I said, oh, no, I don't want to do a radio show, please. No, I don't think I can do that. She wasn't having any of it. So we said, okay, we'll give it a go. So thus was born Twin Souls. And that is part of the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I mean, we do it once a month. I don't think that I with all the other work that I'm doing, we're all important. I don't think I have enough energy to do one a week. It's one a month. So we try to book in UFO researchers, people with different opinions on psychic matters. So we're very, like you, very open-minded. And, you know, I will never negate anything. Because, as I always say, We just don't know. We have a bunch of theories. And my brother and I always have this joke with one another, especially with the UFO phenomenon. We say, well, what have we got after 70 years, just over 70 years of research? We still have a blank page, but hey, we can still keep going forward.
Absolutely.
And it's and I just find that talking to other people, listening to their experiences, listening to their beliefs, comforts me, because for so long I think we're living in a system that's trying to cram everything into one box, and it just won't fit. I think as souls, we are walking our own separate paths to our own unfolding reality. And I think that that is unique to you as the individual, whether or not you're Hindu, or you're Muslim, or you're British, or who, it doesn't matter. Your beliefs are sacred to you. As long as those beliefs don't harm or control or destroy people, then we're all for that. And there's a lot of people who are worried that come to me for readings, and they say, I'm Catholic. Will I burn in hell? And I said, that's the last place you'll burn. It's like no one's going to judge you. No one's going to judge you, because the way we understand it is that life is an experience, and through what they call the panoramic life review, we come to a deeper understanding of who and what we are and our relationship to other souls. So I think the mythos of these, if I may dare say, are kind of, to a degree, manufactured religious ideologies which put the fear of God in people. People shouldn't fear. They should not fear who they are, what they are, where they come from. If they have to believe in what they are, where they come from, where they're going, even if it's just simply being with the family. It's not all about climbing that greasy pole to fame and success. It's about memories. It's about experiences. Because trust me, as you know, and all many people, when you lose the people from this side of life, it is the most painful, desperate situation that's like walking through hell. And that really hurts. So we have to understand that through our journey of life, we are all important. But going back to the radio program, I was very honored. We did have a break for a while, for about 7 months, I think, because my brother and I were very ill. And so we just had to put that on the burner, and now we're back on form again now. So it's been very strange and very hard. But at the same token, I'm so blessed to have been given the opportunity with my brother. And we're on the same page with everything. Me and my brother, we like the same books, we like the same films, we like the same music. He is an artist, a brilliant artist, and he's done a lot of work for magazines, and especially for the Outer Limits magazine, which is created by Chris Evers. He's here in England, a brilliant man. I have a lot of respect for him and Philip Mantle, my peers, because as you probably know, Philip Mantle is what they jokingly call UFO royalty here in England. Mm-hmm. He's the nicest man, the nicest guy you could ever meet on this planet, and he still doesn't know what we're dealing with, and I love that. And Chris Evers has created Out of Limits magazine, and he does the conferences as well. So it's really interesting to bring all like-minded people together. That's what it's about. It's not just about the speaker doing the talk. It's about uniting everyone and enfolding them and embracing them all into the experience, whether it be a radio program, whether it be a lecture. The audience and the people are the most important part to the whole experience. It's rather like having an orchestra. If they have no audience to listen to them, then it's not going to work.
Exactly right. That's one of the things that we, especially with this specific, Full Spectrum Universe is not just this show. It is a flagship show, but it's also my company as well. And one of the things that we aspire to do in the near future is to hold those conferences, because I feel that there is a power. We're bringing these people together, and these ideas that formulate from these specific conferences. And something that you said during this conversation really resonated with me, where, you'll be talking to somebody and somebody else will say something like, well, just to say like Bigfoot, and they look, and then a third party will say, do you really believe in Bigfoot? And you say to them, well, I don't have any evidence contrary to it. So if that person believes that, and they feel wholeheartedly about it, why would I not think that there is a possibility of that being something? You know what I mean? To speak
Oh
in
yeah,
generalities, but somebody's like, "Do you really believe that?" And you're like, "Well, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you?
exactly.
We don't know so much, and we're learning so much every day, and that's one of the things that with the group that I have, that's Full Spectrum Universe. Shout out to everybody in the group. But what I feel that this show and that group and this company is the best exchange of knowledge and information that the internet has to offer, which is why we
Yeah.
bring on guests like yourself, somebody who's so knowledgeable and has been through the gambit from
Mm.
radio to television to ideas to hypotheses. Like you said before, too, that mainstream science most of the time shuns anybody who doesn't follow their bureaucratic oath vibe. And
Yeah.
it's disgusting because they don't know. And they, of all people, should say, well, I think that there is a possibility for just about anything. But they don't
Yes.
do that. They negate that thinking, and that's not science anymore. That's just literally, it's just creating history in a sense, because history is always run by the victors. You know what I mean? There's so much
Yeah.
history out there that we don't know about. So they're
Yeah.
literally creating something that's just it's not open-minded. There is no they're considering that that, like, let's say a variable is X. They're saying that it can only be something like a horse with blinders, that it can only be something in this row, when really it's something in the whole atmosphere.
Yes.
It's such a
Yeah.
weird facade that they put up, that they're actually doing studies and research of science, when really they're not. They're just telling you what they think, and then that's gospel when it shouldn't be.
Yeah. And we are much more. I think we're beginning to understand that we are much more than just the flesh and blood. Sorry, that we occupy. I believe that most people are waking up to the understanding that we are gods in the making, that we have a part with the process of creation, that we also are brilliant, that we can just about do anything if we believe, and that belief is important. I always like that line from the film that I loved, that was made by Disney many years ago, The Black Hole. And one of the authors there had said the word impossible only resides with the dictionary for fools. And I believe that, this belief or this example of what we can achieve is definitely there for you. So anyone who has a belief or has wanting to create and go forward, then do it. Believe in yourself, because a lot of the great people in this life have overcome the most incredible difficulties to get to where they wanted to go. And with each and every one of them, they normally come from someone who has started with absolutely nothing. And I do say I started with nothing, and I still have most of nothing, but it doesn't matter. I'm happy.
Well, exactly. Your life is
I'm
enriched
happy. I'm happy.
from all that,
I'm rich inside.
Exactly. Listen, being wealthy is not possession of money. Being wealthy is being schooled in knowledge and finding new ideas to
Exciting.
exactly. One of the things that I always tell people is, when I was in high school, I was a terrible student. And I'm going to tell you, it's not because I wasn't intelligent enough to do it. It's because I didn't have a drive to learn. I just wanted to do my own thing and be away from the normal trends of society, And then it got to a point where I was in my late 20s, early 30s, where I couldn't find any other joy besides, of course, my girlfriend, who's going to be my wife eventually, in the next couple of months here. But
congratulations.
well, we're not engaged yet. We're getting there. But and I'm not going to give up any information on that, because I know she's listening right now and she wants me to tell her exactly when that's going to happen. But I'm just going to tell you right now, babe, it's going to be soon. And that's all I'm going to say about that. But, the construct of how people would learn in school is different than the construct of how you would learn by yourself doing your own research. It involves subject matter and all these different things. But besides her, there was no other happiness that I can find, even to this day, than doing my own research and learning more. I have such a thirst and hunger and an enjoyment with learning that, sometimes I think about it and I'm like, wow, it's such a night and day difference from when I was younger. You know,
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know if that comes with maturity or age, but I think that there is some, my path has led me here. So I'm going to take full advantage of arming myself with as much knowledge as I can. I mean, I investigate everything: paranormal, UFOs, history, recorded history and not recorded history, ancient astronaut theory, the political
Mhm.
arena. I mean, I'm
Oh, yeah.
just I can't get enough. I can't get enough. And I've done shows on everything. And that's why I love having this premise of a show, is because we can talk about anything. As just in
Mhm.
this show alone, we talked about UFO phenomena, technology and podcasting, clairvoyancy. We've done the whole gambit right now, and I love that. And I am definitely a fan of yours, Philip. I think that it's just, what you do is so important. I think it's so important, and the positivity that you exude while talking to people, and in this information that you've given us, is such an important task. And you've taken it on, and you've done it with a smile, and it when you speak, I feel like I'm learning more and more every time you open your mouth, and I enjoy that. I enjoy that.
Well, I will tell you that, even myself, I always looked up and appreciated and respected my peers. And I was always full of respect for them. And I think it's important that the young are coming forward now. They carry the torch, the mantle for that truth. I am no one important. My idea is that we are all important. But if we can hand something over to the young so that they may carry on, I love that example, to take the torch, to carry it forward, then, that is a job well done. We're going to find out sooner or later. I always say to people, don't worry about it. We're all going to get there. And they look at me not realizing what I'm talking about. It's like we're all going to cross over again. And the transitional period will be very brief and very quick. And they think that heaven is a million miles away. And I said, well, it's around you. They look at me and I say, well, one person said, is there enough room in heaven? And I said, well, does your signal take up any room from your mobile phone? And she looked at me, and it was a humorous moment. And she kind of like got it. And I said, all of us are resonating on our amazing energies. Positive energies, love. I know we all go through difficulties. We all have a bad day and we get angry. That is a human attribute. It'd be worrying if you love and light every minute of the day, but
Absolutely.
using roughly about 70 to 85% of that maximum power of belief and love, and not worrying too much, I think that infuses a greater power, force from the other side into you like a power charge, and that will help you if you open your mind to the concept that you are an immortal soul and that you have a long journey. So my modus operandi has always been to respect every person that I meet and to thank them very much for what they've given, even if they've given nothing, because we're all connected. And that is the most important part. I never know how people will take what I say. I know I've had people saying to me, well, you're wrong. And I say, well, then that's fine, because, we still don't know where we are today. But we have to understand that placing the UFO and psychic phenomena into completely separate categories, it seems to contradict the subject matter at hand, because we're seeing and understanding that there are components to this which is remarkable, and making us more aware of other dimensions of awareness. It's incredible.
It definitely is. We actually have a question from a audience member here by the name of Thomas Alvin. Thomas Alvin
Hi.
do you know anything about the secret space program, or the SSP?
Well, I've heard rumor, and I do believe that there has been a secret space program, definitely, because of Gary McKinnon here in England, who had infiltrated some very sensitive information from US database systems. So I've always believed that the public have been sidetracked into understanding the fossil fuel process of getting into space when they could even be there now. So I am fully open-minded with that concept, because there's a lot of things that does not seem to add up and make sense, and highly speculative, with regards to certain events in history with space travel and certain other events we won't get into here. But it certainly opens our eyes to the fact that, yes, I believe definitely there is a secret space program. And that I think is quite evident.
Oh, it's exceptional. We're coming up on just about an hour. So, Philip, I want you to tell people where they can find all of your work. Lay us down with websites, YouTube channels, whatever you have for us so people can find what you do, because I think it's very important for people who are out there to delve into Philip's work. It's super knowledgeable. It's super important. And I feel that, like we said here, me and him are very like-minded, and I enjoy what I see and what I hear coming from Philip. So please tell them where they can find all of your stuff.
Oh, well, they can find me on Facebook. I don't have a website. I'm designing one at the moment because the other one was too expensive to run. And my books are, well, they're published by different publishing companies, and I've had to bring a few throughout on Amazon. But one of the main ones is A Passage Through Eternity, The Enigma of the Dead, UFOs and Aliens. And also the recent one, Guardians of the Dead, which deals with the psychic component, and the future one, which will come out, called You, the Public Deceived, The Grand UFO Deception. Although it says unavailable at the moment, it will be out in the new year. And YouTube, just punch in my name, Philip Kinsella. There is another Philip Kinsella who is a professional doctor. That's not me, but I think you'll see from the pictures there's a difference between us. But and my brother also, Ronald Kinsella. You can check out his art and his books. He's released a humorous one called I Grey. It's about Through the Eyes of a Grey. It's just released it on Amazon. So I think if you want a good laugh in a nice way, it's illustrated. So look at that one. Thank you so much.
Excellent. And just so everybody knows that me and Philip are actually going to be doing a whole nother hour after this, but it isn't accessible via Facebook or YouTube. There's only one place to find that, or actually two places, which I'll put up here. And what that is it's all of our extra content. Every guest that we have on, we do extra. We literally do a ton of extra stuff. We do a whole extra episode. So for extra content, and it's only $2. Not only do you get that content, you help fuel our engines here and make this machine work and help us to expand and get more people out in the field and to expand what we have. Soon we're going to be getting a brand new camera, a new soundboard, some new microphones. We're going to be upgrading. We're also going to be getting some kind of studio space. Right now I'm coming to you live from my kitchen table, but these messages have to be coming out. So if you subscribe to www.patreon.com Full Spectrum Universe, you have, as of right now, there are 8 extra episodes on there. We try and do 2 to 3 extra episodes a week. With all the stuff coming up this week, it's going to be quite a crazy thing. Also, we have, if you don't like Patreon, some people don't, we have a Subscribe Star. As you can see, it's www.subscribestar.com full-spectrum-universe. And not only that, another thing that we try and do is, if you have a small business and you're trying to actually get off the ground, I totally am on board with that. So we also have a tier for those people as well. For only $100 a month, we will say your advertisement 2 times during every show. We can even make commercials for you. So just to put that out there for people who are trying to get off the ground. Of course, we're looking for startups, whether it be a .com or something that's local or within an area where we can get people. Just to let people know, on average, most of our shows get anywhere from 10 to 11,000 views between servers and different platforms. Just to let people know what our records are here. So if that's something that interests you, please go ahead and do that. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to say goodbye, Philip. I just want you to say one last word to everybody, and we're going to cut the camera off. So everybody, I appreciate everybody for coming in. Philip, thank you. I'm honored to have you on. I hope we can get you on again. And actually, I want you to bring your brother on too, so we can see what you both look like and talk, and we can have an actual roundtable type of conversation. I think it would be so beneficial for everybody. So I'm going to give you one last word before we go out. So I'm going to make you, I believe, the only person. We're going to click on you here, and let's see. Let's go up. We didn't do it right. So we'll just leave it like that. So, go ahead, Philip. Say the last words before we sign out.
Believe in yourself, and thank you very much. Remember to believe in yourself, believe in your work, and let no one convince you otherwise of your beliefs.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. We'll talk to you another time. And that's it for Full Spectrum Universe. Have a great day.